Hello and welcome to Career Talk. I'm Lee Hopwood, CEO at the CCMA and host of this live show where I chat with contact centre professionals to find out about their career journeys. And we do this so that we can really inspire both those that are working in the industry and those that might be wondering whether there is really a viable career in this sector. And oh my goodness, if you haven't listened to a Career Talk before, there really is a lot of opportunity in the contact centre space. And joining me today to talk about his career is Phil O'Shell, who's someone who has already had an illustrious career in this sector, and I can't wait to find out more about that. But Phil, you are the Group Account Lead at the Phoenix Group. Hello, Phil.
Hi, Hallie. Thanks for inviting me today.
And absolute pleasure, and I'm so pleased that you've been able to take some time out because you're incredibly busy. And it's a relatively new role that you've taken on at the Phoenix Group. And I'm going to be honest with you, I need to understand it a little bit more. What does your role actually mean? And who are the Phoenix Group?
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you. So I work for Diligenta on behalf of the Phoenix Group. So the Phoenix Group are the UK's biggest life and pensions company. They have over 12 million customers. And they're continually acquiring business as well. So just to give an idea of the Phoenix Group and the size and scale of the Phoenix Group, they've got Phoenix Life, we've got Reassure, Standard Life, Sun Life, all of these huge brands. And then you've got Diligenta, which is the UK's the forerunner of life and pensions BPO in the UK. So as a business, the partnership between Diligenta and Phoenix is seamless. So as Phoenix grows and they develop their operations footprint, then they look to transform their business. And transform their business when they've got pensions on multiple platforms, what they're looking to do is move their pensions onto that single platform and that go forward view. So as part of my business, I take on board all of their colleagues, I transform their business to work on the future platform, and whilst doing that, maintain their service to their customers. So what does that look like in real terms? Well, in real terms, I've got 4 sites. That's their historic heritage business, which is across the UK. So that's Glasgow, Basingstoke, Peterborough and Liverpool. I cover contact centres, back office, complaints, actuarial, pretty much all of the stuff end to end from a life and pensions business. And then on the 1st of February just gone, the Edinburgh Standard Life business was 2P'd across, which was over 1,000 colleagues. So there's about 2,500 colleagues across the estate. Really exciting business. Phoenix is a successful organisation in its own right, and they're looking for us to partner with them to transform their business and, quite frankly, create a future platform and steady state for them.
Wow, that's massive. I have to find out more about how you got that role, because that's a big role. That's a big responsibility. And I'm going to go back to the beginning, if I may, because you have worked with some. You work with some fantastic brands, Barclays, Barclaycard, Co-op, Capita, Atos, and this is all on the bounce of doing a degree in literature and community studies in Bolton. Take us back, all the way back to maybe school, maybe university. Where did it all start?
Okay, so Right, okay, so 25 years ago, I'll go back 25 years, so hopefully that's not, and I'm not too old right now, but that was a point where I was just finishing my degree. So I was doing my degree in Bolton, as you mentioned, and I did that in literature and community studies. At the time, you sat in a place of where do I want to go? What do I want to do for my future job? However, I remember a point where Barclays as a contact centre was opening up in Salford Quays in Manchester, and one of my friends sent me the advertisement and says, why don't you do this? That'll help supplement your income. You can, quite frankly, work there flexibly, and that'll support. I got a role there in the contact centre, 6 till 10 in an evening, and then it was a Saturday morning as well. And I did my degree in the daytime. So I can remember vividly getting the bus out from Bolton at 4 o'clock, thinking I have to get to Manchester for 5, running through the contact centre to be able to log on time. So that's how it started, really. It was in my mind, it was an 18-month gig to get me through the back end of my degree, and then be able to make a view of whether I started to do my PGCE. That never happened. So that was the start of it. I guess if I think where that ended up in a place that said I finished my degree, and then I thought, well, I'll take some time out. I enjoyed what we did in the contact centre, and a team leader job came up. I thought, right, okay, well, maybe I'll apply for this and see if I'm successful and see if I'll take the year out to go for this team leader role. I applied for the team leader role. I got the role, and then they changed the spans of control, and they said spans of control are different, so we've no longer got any jobs in the Manchester office, but we do have in a place called Doxford Park. And I'm like, right, okay, Doxford Park, where is that? And I'm thinking Newcastle. And no, a few months later, I ended up in Sunderland. And that was the start. First couple of years in the contact centre in terms of working in the phones, but then the start of my leadership career, really, in my early 20s was pretty much in a city I didn't know, and walking for a door that was open by default.
So that first role that you had, that working 6 till 10, was that sales or was that service?
A little bit of both, really. So I remember, if I go back, the training sitting there. I still remember now, understanding the the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, all the kind of stuff when you're getting taken people through security. So it started off in service, we then brought in sales. So sales came in as a kind of a talking about loans and savings and all that kind of good stuff. And then I moved to online banking, which was quite funny, really. So online banking started, and it was pretty much how to log in, and most of the time customers were ringing up not understanding how to log in because it was all very new. The old adage where someone would ring up and you'd say you need to close your windows, and they'd go, what, really, my window in my house? And you'd be like, no, on your laptop. So that's where it started. Yeah, sales and service, and then I did online banking as well.
And you mentioned doing a PGSC. You wanted to be a teacher then?
Yeah. That's where my mindset was early on, which was I was going to do primary school teaching. I've now got a 6-year-old, and quite frankly, the idea of that scares me half to death when I see her and her friends screaming. So maybe I did choose life choices worked out well, but that's where my thinking was early on. It was a case of, based on going to university, based on the fact that what I enjoyed at the time, I felt that's where I could add the most value. And part of that really was the exposure, because I wasn't exposed to financial services. And quite frankly, in terms of where my talents lay, as you went through the door and you started to see a whole new world, it started to make you reconsider what opportunities may lie ahead. So yeah, that disappeared after quite a while.
It's interesting, isn't it, that when you go through it, and I think it's only now being able to reflect back. So it's similar to you 25 years ago going to university, and it's only now that you reflect back that some people they know what they want to do. They've got a target in life. They know what they want to get into, and it's great. But then there are others that through university and in those years, those few years that follow, that's when they actually really discover what they enjoy doing, where they want to be, who they want to be, and that's where some of that change goes. And it's really interesting listening to where some contact center leaders' careers started, not really knowing much about contact centers, finding themselves there and going, I actually quite enjoy this. What was it that you, in those early days, thinking about that team leader role when you came out of university, what was it that you enjoyed in those days that made you go, do you know what, I think I'm going to stay here for a bit longer?
That's a really good question. If I reflect back on the days when I got that team leader role, it was the level of camaraderie. You were, and I think also the fact that the level of investment in myself. So someone that had gone through university and focused on a degree of sorts, you join an organisation that will spend time, that gives you an opportunity to learn as well as lead. And I remember being a team leader in Barclays, and the grounding I look back at now in terms of some of those opportunities to, quite frankly, be mentored, opportunities whereby I met leaders which have been very successful in the organisation for many years, that showed me how good could look and what that could look like. So the learning was immense. And if I think about the contact centre at the time, you're talking 400 or 500 colleagues that were in the contact centre, and it wasn't what the perception of a contact centre was. For me, it was financial services, and people talk about contact centres in one lens, but you've got retail contact centres, financial services. And if you're successful, you can grow through that organisation. You're not just growing in a contact centre, you're growing as the ecosystem that exists. And that's what excited me. It was a case of look at all these opportunities and look at how I could develop myself through this business I've joined. So that really floated my boat very early on.
That's so fascinating. And so you saw that there was plenty of opportunity. So what happened next?
What happened next? So I remember being the team leader, and I spent the first couple of years, it was maybe a couple of years driving and delivering the team, and we had a league tables on sales and all that kind of good stuff. And I performed really well. I was up there in the top 5, 10 teams on a regular basis across what would be about 80 teams across Barclays. And I was really driven around the fact that, right, I've hit a level of quite good success. I'd like to see what the next opportunity is in the organisation. And I looked at the next opportunity and found a job in Barclays International Banking, which was back in Manchester. And this will be the one thing which I say to anyone, even years from now, in terms of a career: go for a role because it's the right role for you that will drive your career long term, not something that's short term. I chose a role at that moment in time which was around a short term salaried role that I thought would be good for me. I joined there. It was very much a back office role. It was a place whereby it's quite dry and didn't really fit who I was. And I spent 6 months in that area, considering the fact of what I had enjoyed for the last 2 years of leading the team. I'd gone into an international payments team, which was around payments processing, and realised actually it wasn't right for me. And I moved back into the contact centres, which were still in Manchester, and worked hard again to get back to where I was. So I made a career choice, which actually maybe wasn't the right one. Then moved back into the contact centre as a team leader again. Within 6 months, I was back delivering where I was. And then I got approached and asked, would I apply to become a CSM? And I'd have been 24 at the time. See, would you like to be a CSM? We're interested in terms of developing the future CSMs for the business contact center managers. And I said, yeah, let's do that. And I applied for the role. And I applied for the role, and it was back in Sunderland. So it was like, can you move again from Manchester back to Sunderland? So I was a bit of a yo-yo at this point. So I applied for it, got the job. And I went from managing 14, 15 people back up north, and ended up with 100 odd people. So it's my first big role, 24 years old, looking after what would have been sales and service at the time, which was quite exciting, really.
Wow. There's so many questions that are going through my head. It's which one do I pull out of my head first? So the opportunities were there, but you decided to take a slightly different step, and the way you talk about that role is quite as if you. I want to say it's almost like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. But do you wish you hadn't done it, or actually you pleased you did that because it actually showed you something that you didn't enjoy doing?
Yeah, if you said to me at the time, did I enjoy taking it? Of course I would have said no, because it was the wrong thing. If I said, am I glad I did it? And I look back, I'd absolutely say I'm glad I did it. There's a couple of choices in terms of my career, and I look at diversity. Diversity of a career allows you to understand what you are good at and make good choices. I think also as a contact centre or an operations professional, if you just sit in a linear role, you will never learn. You can't bring breadth to your role. We'll talk a little bit about it. I've been a approved person in risk, and I've moved around and grown my career, so I can have much more mature conversations. And I think if you do that and you realise it's not right for you, you still learn. So I'm glad I did it, but I also realised that actually it wasn't for me, and I can move myself on the right path. And it happened early in my career, and I appreciate the fact that things happen, and you just need to make a change along the way.
Yeah. I also want to touch on the training that you had. You mentioned that you had the opportunity to learn. And part of what I want to draw out from understanding what learning opportunities you had 20 years ago as you went into the CSM role, but also reflecting on what CSMs get now from a learning opportunity, and people coming into contact centres, that learning is so important for people to feel comfortable in working in the contact centre environment. Certainly if you're coming straight into the front line. What training did you get as you went into maybe team leader, but also into the CSM role? Did you get formal training? You touched on mentoring, but
yeah, there was a whole host of training, really, and quite a mix of training. So if I consider when I was a CSM, some of that training would have been, those branch managers that were working in the bank. And I remember one of the things I learned at the time, and I still take that theme today, which was, as you've got the rigor of a role, how do you drive the rigor in your business, and how do you have a daily cadence of what good looks like? Because when you join as a team leader into a CSM role, everything's new, and your workload gets bigger, your inbox gets bigger, and it's almost a case of, how do you manage your day to day? How do you make sure the fact that I prioritize correctly? and how do I understand the impact of stakeholders? And one of the things I look at in my career and the colleagues that work for me is I always think you've got a bit of an ecosystem you work within. You've got stakeholders in your own organisation, you've got colleagues as stakeholders, you've then got customers as stakeholders, and really sitting down with people to understand how you make sure you work that system and work it to your best possible scenarios so we can all be successful. You're not just focused on customers, you're focused on colleagues as customers and everybody else. I remember sitting down with quite a lot of the people that joined the business, and that would have been some of the people that have been in Barclays for a long time, and let alone some of the newer colleagues, and really taking off best practice from them and being able to kind of absorb all of that learning, and being a sponge, because quite frankly, the one thing I'd say to anyone is be a sponge. You don't know the right way. If I met someone in their early 20s who were joining a career and they believed that they knew the right way, my thing I'd ask them is that, please, listen, because actually, you know what, some people will quite frankly give you good advice and you may choose to take it or not, but actually just listen anyway, because you'll never know unless you do listen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was chatting with Babadell, who won Team Leader of the Year at the UK Awards last year, and he talked about the fact that what he did was listen. He's relatively new into his contact center career and doing amazing, but he talked about the fact that he likes to listen. So I think that's a great piece of advice. So what happened next? So you're in the CSM role?
CSM role. So I did that for, a good couple of years, really. And I was successful. So I won a platinum award at one point where I went off to Boston. Barclays flew us off to Boston, went there, and it was all the prestige of all that kind of good stuff. Very successful in the role. The role grew. So I did sales and service, then I did Barclays loans, looked after the lending division across the contact centres. At some point, I moved back to Manchester because there was an opportunity in their contact centre as CSM because there was a challenge in attrition. So can I work with the team there? That was quite exciting as well. So you're just moving people around that were best fit to support. And it was a case of, I got to a point again a couple of years later where it was a case of, right, I've got itchy feet again. What else can I deliver and how can I drive value again? And I guess part of my thinking and my psyche is the fact that if the door opens, walk through it. If the door opens, never leave the door closed. Always try and make sure the door opens. And the other part of my mindset, and someone said this to me once, and I'll always remember this, which is take a seat at the table. Don't allow somebody else to take that seat. You take the seat at the table and evidence the fact that you can add value. And I guess at that point there was some roles that turned up within Barclays, which was one of them was to be the head of sales across Barclaycard. And there was two at the time. There was one that was in Manchester and one that was in Teesside. I was back in Manchester, and it was a case of, right, I could move back to the northeast. And one of the things I would say to anyone listening to this, and I know COVID's happened and we can work from home more, but my life has been spent the last 20 years traveling. And I travel, my home may be wherever it is, but I travel for work and I'm happy to go in, work in different locations. If you're location driven and you decide that's all you want to do, then you will drive the confines of your world to that point. You almost have to open your mind to say, actually, Wes, I can drive my career as hard as I want as long as I open my mind and drive location as no barrier. And that will change because, we're hybrid now and that helps as well. So I moved to Teesside to look after being the head of sales for Barclaycard. And I have to say that the 3 or 4 years I was there was wonderful. But you look back in terms of financial services and you look back, there's a moment in time as well. So I was selling PPI and card protection and all the things which a couple of years later, the banks were then saying we needed to stop selling. And I had a couple of hundred people. We did customer servicing, but I was very much the sales engine of the business. And you look and you go, there's a world which existed, which was service customers, sell to customers. There was treating customers fairly. There's customer outcomes. So we're going through that whole plateau, and I look back and I can see the cycle we've been in and how that's operated. But it was an exciting period. Sales was a wonderful place, real place of recognizing great performers, and very much my DNA is about sales and giving people sales techniques, because I honestly believe that, and I will say this no matter what role anybody works within, is we are always selling ourselves as people, whether you work in servicing or anywhere else. When somebody meets someone, the way you present, do you care? Are you passionate? Are you interested in the organisation you work for? You're selling yourself and you're selling the organisation you look after. So Barclaycard was 3 or 4 years in Teesside, great period of my career, thoroughly enjoyed it. And that was kind of the point, I guess, where I'd spent about 11 or 12 years at Barclays then, because I've been around lots of areas. And I got to a point in Barclays whereby I felt like if I was going to continue in the contact centres or within Barclays, I'd have to look to diversify and go somewhere else, branches, etc. Or there was another choice to be made. So yeah, Barclays was an exciting place and great time within the banking system, but quite frankly, something which we won't be going back on now.
And I love the fact that you talked about all of the different places, all the different areas that you've been in, and it's something that seems to be a real theme for the leaders that I talk to is getting as much experience across all the different areas. Like you talked about sales, service, the retention, complaints, whatever aspect. You talked earlier about being involved on the online banking side of things, albeit in the early days. But having all of those experiences clearly helps to build your confidence and your robustness as a contact center leader.
I completely agree, and I think if you understand the wider aspects of the end-to-end business, you can then also have a conversation which is broader than just a narrow conversation around the metrics associated to your part of the world. You do need to understand that, and the more diverse you're going to be, the better. And sometimes, by the way, that's frightening. People will be uncomfortable around going, well, do I move? And that my background is that I joined an organisation as a contact centre leader, and someone wants me to go and work in, I don't know, run a complaints function or run something broader. My ask to any would be, if you don't step out of your comfort zone, at some point somebody will move you out of your comfort zone and you won't be ready. So, you do need to put yourself in that place of being uncomfortable, because it does drive and it stretches you well.
I love that. Move out of your comfort zone when you are ready, not when someone else forces you to.
Absolutely, because at some point they will force you and then you won't be ready.
Yeah, and then it's really hard to handle it. So from Barclaycard, you then went to Co-op.
Back down the motorway, absolutely. So, so I was in Teesside, back to Manchester. When would that have been? That would have been, like sometime in the mid 2000s, late 2000s. So 2009, somewhere around that, I think, possibly. I'm just thinking when it was. So yes, I went to Co-op, general insurance, worked in general insurance for a little while, and then moved. And I was the head of site at the Pyramid in Stockport. So for anyone who's flown out of Manchester, it's pretty much iconic building. And I looked after, at the end of the 5 years I was there, mortgages through MMR and the process in terms of giving advice, customer service operations. I had a business banking operation, and what else did we have? Our sales function and outbound function. So the whole thing resided. I had about 500 colleagues at that point, and Co-op had taken on the Britannia business as well. So I had a lead office as well there at that point. So it was a really enjoyable part of my period of my career. I think that the one thing I look back on in terms of Co-op was the culture was very different. I'd gone from a culture within Barclays of very much a performance culture, and the Co-op culture was one which actually was a very caring culture, and that was great. But actually, as you join in an organisation, some of the differences you could see very quite quickly, really, from being a bank to what was a cooperative and how that cooperative operated as well. It was also going through a level of change because the Britannia was coming on board, what that looked like, and how we needed to bring the Britannia on board at the same time as some challenges in terms of the banking sector as well. So yeah, an exciting period, really. It was an interesting period at the Co-op, and a lot of good memories in terms of some good people there.
Absolutely, and I isn't that the same time that Anne-Marie Stank was at the Co-op?
Anne-Marie recruited me.
I thought that was the case. And I mean, what a great manager, what a great boss, what a great person to coach and mentor you. And during your time at Co-op, just so that anybody that's looking at job titles, what did you go in as and what did you leave as?
Yeah, so I left as a head of site and I went in as an operator, so a head of operations for general insurance. And I left as the head of the site, so within a 5-year period. So I'd gone across, and really it was more around consolidating how I operated. Previously within Barclays, it was very similar, a different product set. But then within a couple of years, I'd moved on to run the like I say, the numerous functions across the business, and it was, like I say, quite exciting, really.
No, absolutely, and put you in a great place for your next role.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And how did you, what was it that made you go, "Do you know what, I don't want to be at Co-op anymore. I actually want to," and I suspect it was potentially Itchy Feet again, but I want to go to this next role, and there's that next role. What was it that was going through your mind during that transition?
So, so timing's everything, and very seldom have I proactively applied for a role because the role has come along and someone's had a conversation and said, "You perform well in this role, you are successful, we'd like to talk to you." And at that time, the mortgage business that I looked after, I was working on MMR, and the Co-op was outsourcing the business to Capita. So I was going to be outsourced to Capita, and that was going to be a transformational activity, and Capita was going to own the business. At the time, I'd applied for a role, and it was going to be in an insurance company in Spinningfields in Manchester, and I was successful for the role. So they wanted me to join that, and I was due to join. Capita then had a conversation with me to say, "You understand mortgages well. In fact, you understand the business well. Would you be interested in joining us? And over the next 9 months, if we could put you through your training, accreditation, all that good stuff, and you develop yourself to be our first line risk manager, build the frameworks to manage the risk portfolio, recruit a team, and help us grow the business in that space." So I'd go from a place whereby my career at that point was quite linear, looking at kind of more leadership roles, and then going, well, actually, what I can do is go into a harder space and put myself in this learning of, quite frankly, something I've not done before. It didn't take long for me to go, well, actually, that's mostly the right thing to do, rather than continuing on the trajectory I was on. So that's how that happened, really. Spent 6 to 9 months of working with the Co-op and Capita in terms of how we're going to catch the business when it landed, the TUPE process, all the good stuff that sits around outsourcing, and planning that. This is over 10 years ago now. And then we went live. I remember moving house at the time, and on the weekend I was supposed to be moving house, having to be in Plymouth for a go live weekend, and getting ready for the business to go live, which was really quite exciting. And spending a couple of years as the CF29, looking after the risk portfolio. The business grew. We got the Tesco Bank contract, looked after their mortgages as well. All good stuff, really.
And I can see some of the things that you did at Capita. I can see that resonates quite a lot with the role that you're doing now. Some of that learning, that being that, all of that kind of stuff seems to have been a really good learning place for you.
Absolutely. And the part around the Capita journey for me, I was successful in the first couple of years. I don't say to anybody, always throw yourself into stuff. Always make sure the fact that you leave no stone unturned in terms of what you're taking on board and you're learning. That's whether it's in the organisation or outside. And after that couple of years, I got offered the opportunity to be the managing director in the collections business. And he said, right, okay, you've got leadership skills, you understand the risk portfolio. We want you to come in, help us develop the collections business. And there's some parts of the business we might want to continue with. There's some parts we might want to downsize. How can we do this? But very much my DNA is about taking people with you. And if this is going to be a challenge, I can get in front of the colleagues and front good messages, challenging messages, but take people with me as well. So I did that, and I was happy to stay, actually, in terms of Capita. I was in no shape or form looking to move on. And what would have been, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I got a call to see if I was interested in joining Atos, and joining them as what would be their client executive. And that would have been looking after their protection business in Lytham St Anne's. And then what would have been a couple of years later, then taking on a bigger portfolio, looking after their pensions business in Edinburgh as well. And what excited me about this more so, and a little bit like the role I'm on now, is about how can you transform a business? Because you can take a business from a BAU state, and that's great. You can deliver it BAU, and there's a day-to-day performance cadence and that. But that's what I was doing in my 20s, because that's about service delivery. The most exciting part of a job is how do you transform a business to what the customers want and what colleagues want, and quite frankly, shareholders want going forward. And the Atos journey was all around how do we transform a business, be it from the systems, people, experience, and also how do we do that from the client's lens as well and give them a better experience for their customers. So I started off in protection, where we went on a journey, which was, I was talking to you earlier on, with CCMA, where we got to the final of the best outsourced partner in the UK, or quite frankly, the European one. And it was wonderful bringing colleagues on that journey, and we delivered the best sales results that had done in years. And then I moved into the pensions business as well, taking on an extra 800 colleagues, looking at how we could transform that business. And one of the activities there we worked on was, quite frankly, there's two ways you transform a business. You transform a business from a technology stack, but you should always transform a business through actually the people and the systems that sit around it. So what could we look at that says, where are the journeys? How do we improve those customer journeys? And how do we improve the colleague experience to make sure those journeys are better for customers? And in doing that, by the way, we saved cost, significant cost, because we made life easier. But what we didn't always do is looking at adding costs. We said if we improve that journey, actually, the outcome will be better for everybody as well. So that was great. Atos was a great experience for me. Enjoyed it there. And again, wasn't something I was looking at saying I wanted to leave. But then I got a call. I reckon it was the beginning of last year, and the conversation was if I was interested in to start having conversations to be the group account lead for Diligenta to run the Phoenix portfolio. And truth be known, the only reason that I walked through that door is because the size and the scale of the opportunity, and quite frankly, the gravitas of Phoenix and what that looks like. And what's very important to me is being able to then say, how can we do something different and how can we transform a business? And through the skills I've been able to get through contact centres, I now have a business which is operations at a significant scale. It's transforming based on technology, and it's also transforming based on people and process as well. So yeah, it keeps me awake each day, and I've got lots of things I go to bed sleeping about and thinking about. But it's something that makes me jump out of bed in the morning, gets me quite excited, really. So that's what got me to here.
Wow, and being able to make a difference, and just thinking back of all those things you've done, what do you think has been your greatest achievement so far?
It's interesting, really. I was thinking about it before we talked, and it'll be easy to say, well, you know, you got an accolade on this or you won this, and I think that becomes a moment in time. I think my greatest achievement is I feel like I've left businesses in a better place than when I got them. And when I look at most businesses, if I went and spoke to the people when I was in them, they'd say that Phil's focus is around people and how he's able to energize people and quite frankly, show that he cares. And, you know, my intent will always be to be able to walk away from a business knowing that I've done something that's better than what it was when I received it. And I think that's the thing which actually I can look back on and be quite proud of.
It's certainly one of the common themes with everybody I talk to is the importance of people. And in that vein, what do you wish you'd learned sooner that you could have done with knowing earlier in your career?
Okay. Diversity. What do I mean by diversity? When I was young and when I was young in my career, I would have looked at leaders and thought those leaders need to replicate who I am. So if I was in my early 20s, I'd have looked at someone that was very different than me and gone, they're in a sales business and they are a reflector, they're bringing certain things to the table. Actually, wait a second, that's not right. You need to act a certain way. As my career has developed and I look around the teams that sit around my table, the level of diversity is more important now than ever. And I'm talking about diversity of thought, I'm talking about diversity about, you know, gender, all that kind of good stuff, because the conversation is richer. And this isn't me saying it based on any PR conversation, is that I have a team where I need to look at capability. I want people that are great in operations. That's great, I want you delivering that, but I want people that are great at transforming businesses. And I also want people that are great at governance, control, rigor. But if I just recruit the same people, I'm not going to get people that are going to challenge that thinking. And I need people that have great diversity to develop the business as well. So I'd have that conversation with myself 20 years ago now and say, you'll be more successful quicker if you understand that different people will bring that to your team. But understand those team skills, because if you don't understand the skills, you don't really know what you're bringing on board anyway.
That's really good advice, really good advice. And do you know what, as you were talking there, I was reflecting that back into your career actually, and the different departments you've worked in that has given you that diversity in your career to enable you to go on and do transformation projects. But yeah, absolute champion, diversity of all kinds. I think that's a really good shout. We're nearly at end of time, so I'm going to go straight into some quick fire. I say quick fire, they're never quick fire, but quick fire questions.
Go for it.
Home working or office working?
Oh gosh, office. I like people. I eventually get annoyed with my own company, quite frankly. I can do a couple of days a week. After a couple of days a week, I want to see somebody. I want to drink at the coffee machine. I don't want to talk to myself all day. And eventually, I don't want to keep talking to people on the Teams. So So yeah, I'd like to be in the office, please.
Love it. LinkedIn or Facebook?
Oh, geez. You know what? My Facebook now is just full of adverts, quite frankly. I've kind of stopped. I like Twitter. But
Oh, interesting.
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, yeah. To be fair, I'm a bit of a LinkedIn fan. And then your last one, Desert Island Disc. Usually you have 8 recordings that you can choose, but I'm going to give you one. Which one recording would you choose for Desert Island Discs?
I would go with Thunder Road, Bruce Springsteen. So that would be my record, and I would tire it out endlessly. I'm going to see him in Munich this year, going live. Been to see him about 8 or 9 times. I would go and see Thunder Road would be pretty much played until it finished. Although, quite frankly, having a 6-year-old, quite frankly, she'd take it off me and put George Ezra on, and I'd be listening to Green Grass, and I'd be I think George Ezra seems to be the favourite in our house at the moment. But there you go.
Do you know what? You need to talk to Stephen Yap, our research director. He's a bit of a Bruce Springsteen fan.
Oh, fab.
Yeah, who knew? Do you know what, Phil? This has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for giving me your time and sharing your experiences. And you've shared so much advice and ideas and thoughts. And I think you're going to have really inspired people that are listening to this. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Take care. See you soon.
Cheers,
Bye.
bye.